Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to continue with our blog projects. So in the last episode, we integrated some parts of our homepage, and as you can see on the screen, we have nothing showing. And this is solely because the server is no longer running, and we can easily just start that from here. However, another thing I observed in the last episode was that I was running on the SQLite server. And as a result of that, I have to go back to the Juice app to update the prompt. So now when we start the server, we get this prompt. Note that using SQLite database means your data will be lost once the server is closed. And this is what happened to me in the last episode. So all the data I had saved went off as soon as the server closed. So in order not to fall into the same situation again, I went back to create a Postgres server that I can use to test. And based on that, I'm able to set up my database as you can see here. So with this now, it means when my server goes down, as long as the Postgres server is running on its own, then it's going to retain all the data it had initially. So that's just the information I thought I should share. And now again, I can start my server and I will start working again. So let me quickly start it. Alright, so as you can see, the server is up and running and we can easily check through. Go to our blog paths. And we'll find out that all our data still exists. And this is because this is being served from our Postgres DB. Okay, that's cool. And now if we refresh our home page, we are going to get back our data. And that's also looking good. So if we go back to our Trello board, the plan for today is to integrate our search, and we can actually drag that to doing. However, the requirement for the search is going to be our dropdown. So here's what the search is going to look like at the end of the day. And for us to actually have the search, this dropdown needs to exist. Another place where we are going to use the dropdown is with the tag menu, as we can see. So the whole idea here is that the tag menu is going to show 10 tags at a time. However, we can click on the menu icon here to show a dropdown of all the tags we have in the system. So this is going to include all the tags that is currently showing as well as the ones that were not showing at that moment. Okay, so that's just something to note. So as a result of that, the dropdown is going to be a major component. And we can easily just go online and search for dropdowns and try to tweak, and that might work, but going through the flow might be complicated sometimes. So instead, what I would do is I would show us how we can create ours and kind of customize it to fit our needs. So we are going to create it having in mind that we want to use it with our search as well as our tag menu. So that's going to be the plan. However, it's a prerequisite for integrating the search. Okay, so we are technically still working on integrating the search, but our focus for this episode is going to be on building the dropdown components. So with that said, let's get back into our code and start building. So coming back into our component folder, we are going to be creating a hook for our dropdown components. So let's do that. And for those of us who don't know how to create a custom hook, this is going to give us an avenue to learn that. So when you are creating a hook, just like you are creating a React component, there is a naming format. So if you are creating a component, it has to start with a capital letter. Same with when you are creating a hook, it has to start with use. So let's create the structure for that. Alright, so here is the structure for the use dropdown hook, and we can come down here to export it. Okay, so that's the first part. The next part is we want to have a component to render. So this is the component that will render wherever we want to use it. So here we can have const get dropdown. And this component is going to take in the children that we are going to render within the dropdown. And the children is going to be of type react.reactNode. Then finally, we want to return a div. So this div, we are going to give it a class name of dropdown. Then another class name I want to give it is close. So by default, this dropdown is going to be closed. So I want to control the hiding and the visibility through class routes instead of using states. And this is a better way of implementing it instead of using useState to hide or show it. Remember, when you change a state, your whole content re-renders. However, when you are hiding things using class, your DOM handles the change and not React. Okay? So that's why we are going to have a default of close. It might not be acknowledged by default, but we are going to have it there. Then in here, we are going to have the children. So the content within our dropdown is going to be seen here. Then because the hook is going to be an extension of something, we can pull in some of the information we want to get from it. So see a hook as a component on its own that you can just use its resources. Okay? So in here, we want to return the get dropdown function. And this function is expected to return a component, which we can then use wherever we want to use it. So that's the first part. The second part is we want to have a ref. We are going to see how we are going to use that ref later on. But here I'm going to define a ref called wrapper ref. So for our ref, because we are not certain what is going to be wrapping, we are going to give it a type of any. Then also we're going to return this wrapper ref as an export. Oh, sorry, we have to put a return here. So next we want to define two functions, one to set open and the other to set close. And we can easily implement those functions. All I have to do here is to add an ID to my dropdown element, and I'll call this dropdown container. So within the set open, so all I have to do here is to get the element and remove the close class. Then for the close, all I have to do is to return the close class. And for this, I'm going to create an extra function to get the element itself. And all this function has to do is just return the element to us. So in here, we can get an element by ID by having the structure document.getElement by ID, then the ID we are checking. Then within the set open, all we have to do is to call get dropdown element, and we are going to check if the element exists. And if it does, we are going to locate the class lists, and we are going to remove the close class. Then for the set close, we are going to do the same thing. However, we are going to add in this case. So that means we are going to return both the set open and the set close. Then finally, in terms of functionality, the usual case scenario is that whenever you have a dropdown, if you click anywhere outside the dropdown, then the dropdown should close. So we want to consider that functionality as well. And we can implement this within a use effect. So what we are going to do is we are going to have a use effect. And in here, we want to add an event listener. So the event we want to check here is mouse down. So whenever we click, that's a mouse down event. And at that point, if our dropdown is opened, we want to close it unless some consideration. And that's where our wrapper ref comes in. So we're going to wrap our reference around contents or container we do not want this functionality to influence. Okay, so let's continue with that. So here we're going to have a function. Let's define it. So undo outside click. And this is going to take an event of any. Yeah, technically it's going to be an event of HTML element, but that has been something kind of technical in identifying when it comes to React. So we can just use any here and we ignore the rest. So now we can call this function here. And remember, when you are adding an event listener to a use effect, it's always okay to remove it once the component mounts. And to do that, we can have return. And this function is going to be called once the component mounts. And what we want to do is we want to document.event remove event listener, mouse down, then the same function. And that's the flow for that. So within our undo outside click function, all we want to do here is whenever we click outside of our wrapper ref, then we want to close the dropdown. And to do that, we can have if wrapper ref.current, that is, if it's attached to something, and the wrapper ref.current does not contain. So contains is part of an event information or your element information. So if it does not contain event.target, so to have it as not, then we have this. Then we want to set close. However, doing this means whenever we click outside the drop-down component, then it's going to call this function, and this function will keep adding the class close. That means we want to check if this element does not have the class close before we add it. And here we want to only remove it if it exists. So to do this, I'll create one extra function. And to do this, all we have to do is return get dropdown elements dot class lists dot contains. So that's all we have to do. So we could actually have done this within our function, but having functions this way and making sure that each one performs a specific task makes testing easy, okay? So in case we decide to test this in the future, it makes testing quite easy. So in here, we can say we want to set this open if it has the closed class. So we can say if it does not have the closed class, then it should return. So there's nothing to remove at that point. So if not as closed class, then return. So that will fix that. Then for the set close, if it has it already, then it should return. So it should just be the reverse case. So we can copy this. If it has it, then return it. And with this, we are done with our drop-down components. So what is left now is to use it. And all these are the contents we need to return in order for us to use the drop-down components. So we are going to be using the drop-down component within the search. So let's come back here and import it. So import use drop-down from drop-down. And in here, we are going to have const use drop-down like that. So here we want to have the wrapper ref. Then we want to have the set open. Then the set close. So here we want to attach the ref to the search component. So this is going to be wrapper ref. And also we need the get dropdown. And under the search, we want to have the get dropdown here. So remember this takes in a React component. So I'm going to have a div here. And within my div, I want to look through some items. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then map it. So I'll just show the items within an li. Then we're going to have a key here. And yeah, that's the usage for our dropdown. However, if we pull up our terminal, we are going to see this error. So this is complaining that we are trying to use a client component as a server. Because remember from our last tutorial, we tend to make a call to our server through here. So to fix this error, all we have to do is to tell Next.js, and this particular functionality is peculiar to the latest Next.js, Next.js 13. So we have to tell it that this is only going to be a client component. So we can say use clients, and we'll find out that our error would go. As you can see, our error is gone. So that's something new, and that's something we should adhere to. I think this is happening solely because Next.js kind of treats every component out of the box as a server component, unless stated otherwise. Okay? So we go back to our browser, and we refresh, and we'll see this here. And this is happening because we don't have any styling for our dropdown. So let's quickly deal with that. So I'll play around with the style and get back to you as usual. Alright, so here is the styling for my dropdown. However, we are going to see some issues. So if we come back to the browser, we find out that the dropdown is just playing around here. And that's because within the style, we set the position as an absolute. So the absolute is going to work with something. And if it doesn't find anything, it's going to result to the whole home page itself. So to fix this, we can come back to the search itself. Since the dropdown is within the search, we can locate the search. Then set the positioning to be relative. Then that means the dropdown will be constrained to just the search. And as a result, we have this, which looks good already. So by default, it's showing, and that's because we've not considered the class. So all we have to do now is just implement the close class for the dropdown. And here we can have .close and .close because they are on the same line. I can just say display cross to none. And now nothing is showing by default. However, if we click here, nothing still shows. And that's where we have to use the functions we brought in. So we have the set open and we have the set close. So it means whenever we focus on our input, so on focus, set open. So for now, we are not using this set close, but we are going to use it in the future. So I'll just leave it there. So let's test what we have. If I click on it and stay there and click on anything within our wrapper ref, then it stays open. However, if I click out, it stays closed. And we can try to inspect to see if there is any leak. So here is our console. Click on it, nothing happens. It means everything is working well. So yeah, there we have it for our drop-down component, and this will be used when we are implementing the tag menu as well. So it's okay to just have it as a component and we can reuse it. So in the next episode, we will focus on implementing the sash, or rather integrating the sash proper. So again, if you enjoyed the episode, try to leave a thumbs up, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. So there you have it, guys. See you in the next episode. Bye for now.